All right, so let's take a look at making a mouth. So one of the things I do is I start to think about whether or not the mouth is going to be open on this character, if it's just going to be a background character. Let's assume that for this particular one, we're going to make a character that has a mouth that's open. So what I tend to do is just sort of pull out kind of the top lip. Let's pull this up a little bit. And I make a mouth kind of hole. And I usually line this up. If we look at it from the front view, you want your mouth essentially where the widest point of the head, which in mine seems to be up here, but really it should be the jawline. So roughly where the jawline is where I'm going to be placing this mouth. So I just make a mouth cavity. Again, I'm holding control, by the way, so I move it in one direction. Move this up. Don't worry too much if you're, I call it crystallization, where it starts looking like these little crystals, but your mouth starts to crystallize or something. Because you'd always hit Control R, and it'll re-topo it for you. All right, so there's my mouth cavity. Now I'm going to go back to object mode, and then hit Shift A, and then go to Mesh, and then I'm going to add a cylinder here. So hitting S to scale that down, hitting G to move that forward. And then S, and then depending on the axis you want to move it. So for me it's Z, it's going to move that in. So something like that. All right, let's do S and Z, scale it up just a little bit. And then I'm going to hit Shift and D to duplicate, see that? And I'm going to hit Escape and then G like George and Z to move that down. And I tend to put like just a little gap in there. So something like that. Let's select the head again and go back to sculpt mode and just start to shape out the mouth. I tend to make sure that I have a nice roundness. I love curves. I think they're like beautiful. And a lot of times I'll do that with a lot of my characters. So something like this is nice. I'm gonna hit Shift or Control D rather and turn Dine Topo back on. And let's just throw some lines in where the lips are. So actually what might help is just hitting Shift a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of go down. And I tend to curve up a little bit like this, just so we kind of have a little bit of a mouth, like a smile. And I go a little bit lower here, just because the mouth is open. Now with my clay strips brush rather, forgive me if I start saying some like the ZBrush equivalent, which might be good if you're following along in ZBrush. Tend to just kind of carve in that here. Let's go over this just a little bit more. And then I just kind of fatten it up just a little bit. Same thing down here. And I love having the option of being able to animate my characters. So that's why I like doing the open mouth technique. Sometimes I'll even do it with the NPCs with the hope that maybe I will either, if it's for a company, maybe I'll get the opportunity to animate it. Okay, let's soften this up a little bit. And then underneath this, because I'm going to soften this a lot, I'll carve that in. Kind of like the Joker. All right, so let's go ahead and shape this a little bit better. So notice that it's almost completely flat. What I'm going to do is grab my grab brush here and just start to pull this out just a little bit more. And I want, like, for me, my cuter characters tend to have a nice sort of curve inside of here. So they get like a nice curve. Like I was saying before, I really love curves. Ooh, it's a little too pronounced. And that little indent in where the nose is, I usually make it just as wide as this inner nostril flap here. So this guy right here, I usually just make this indent. Just about as wide as that. And his mouth positioning, like his upper lip positioning, is still way too low. So I'm going to hit Shift R because I feel like, let's deselect Dine Topo, Control D, and then Shift R. And I kind of feel like mine is a little too low, so I'm going to hit Control R there. There we go. So I'm not losing a lot of that, and it still gives me some nice smoothing. It's sort of like a freebie for me. So let's kind of really pull this up. Let's pull this up as well. Let's give him a little bit of a divot for his chin and pull that lip out. And right now all I'm doing is just kind of shaping it, looking at what kind of character. Do I want to keep this like super cartoony? Do I want to go stylized? Remember, this is a generic head, so this could be male or female. It doesn't really matter. Really whatever kind of character you want to make. I'm going to pull that jaw just a little bit more. This is really kind of where I stop. I mean, I'm always kind of just double checking the roundness, the smoothness. And really, you'll see people who are like, I spent 4 weeks on this character. And a lot of that has to do with the perfectionism and the tweaking of the model. But this is kind of like one of my favorite approaches. And then later you can just kind of like, whoop, pull all this stuff together. You know, when you want to close up the mouth. But you have the mouth there. You just kind of keep shaping it. You know, and you could say, you know, my character actually has much thinner lips or much wider lips, or that, you know, like if you want your characters, again, the cuteness in the character when it comes to profiles and stuff really is getting that nice curve here, getting a nice curve there. You just kind of pull this stuff out. I'm going to pull this back just a little bit. Anyway, I'm pretty much done. That's where I'm at with the mouth. And what we'll do next is the ears.